Good afternoon. Happy Monday. I hope you guys had a fantastic weekend. I know that you guys are finishing up your classroom management projects this week that you worked on this past week. I'm looking forward to seeing those. So you have a quiz that's due today, as well as to submit your classroom management plan. So I look forward to that. And remember that is so important on that classroom management plan. And that this is just your first step, and every year that you teach, you're going to fine-tune that every single year as you get to know who you are as an educator, and that's okay. So we're excited. Your classroom management plan is so important, but what is also instrumental is your curriculum and your lesson plans. That is your day-to-day. That is your cornerstone. That honestly, if your lesson planning isn't effective or isn't engaging, it actually affects your classroom management. So these things you really need to think about as you are creating that classroom environment in order for it to be conducive to your lesson plans. But if your lesson plans fall flat, they're not engaging, and they don't see the value or the purpose of what you're doing, then it was really purposeless. There's no purpose for it. So, and I really want to make sure that you realize that what you're teaching, why are you teaching it? What's the value? Can you answer that? Can the students understand? Do your students understand why they are learning what you're teaching? And I have to tell you this, in my experience, it wasn't until I started making connections with my students of this is why we're doing what we're doing, that they actually started to engage more. So even though in these lesson plans, it doesn't say, what is your value? How are you going to teach value? And I guess you could probably work that in, but I have to tell you, and this is after many years of just wondering, why am I not engaging my students? And that aha moment, because I'd heard that statement, well, why do I have to learn this? And I'd heard it for the last time. And I'm like, you know what? Why do you have to learn this? And so that really made me become very retrospective and introspective of what I was doing and why I was doing it and what was the purpose. And then how was this going to play into their plan, which is so important. So you have to make sure that they have to see value. They have to see purpose behind what you're teaching. If not, they're just going to do what their bare minimum, and then they're going to move on about themselves. And then we're going to end up in that rat wheel of every year, because they just learned it, to regurgitate it, to forget it. Then the teacher after them is like, why do you not know this? And then it becomes this, well, she's not doing her job. So if we really work together and we really start saying, really, what is my purpose here? We will actually have true scaffolding, meaningful education. And remember what that scaffold is. It's, we saw the Capitol building under construction, and they had the base, and then they built it up, and then they built up so the guys could work on it in a safe environment, because it was flat. It wasn't just a ladder. They could walk around. It was a good, solid foundation that they could build another foundation, that they could build another foundation. And that's really what education is. And that's why we use the word scaffolding a lot. Oh, I probably want to know that, scaffolding. Because you're going to see that on a quiz this week. Up until this point, everything that you've had has been in your textbook. This week, it is not. And so I am creating the information for this week, and I have placed a lot of that in your folder, which means you are required to know that I will be having an assessment. I'm basically doing concepts, things that you're going to be hearing a lot that I need you to be mindful of. Okay, so a couple things that I placed in your module this week is a copy of a lesson plan. This is actually a lesson plan that I did when I was in graduate school. I think I was teaching government at the time, and so this was for one of my lessons. So if you have not already, will you pause the video and make a copy of this if you've not done that already? This way you're able to make some notes. As we're going through, I'm going to be adding a couple areas and maybe taking some out, but there's some things depending upon if it's applicable to you or not. So make sure that you've printed this out and that you have something that you can take notes with. I have also included the template for this, which means it's in there, but it's blank. That is what you will utilize this week for your assignment. So you want to make sure that you download that. And we're going to walk through that step by step. One of the main pieces of lesson planning is your objectives. And so you will see that I have placed in your folder Bloom's Taxonomy. This is the one that everybody follows. And then there is the Bloom's Taxonomy action verbs. And we're going to go into that when I get to that piece of it. You probably want to print those out because they are such a great resource for when you're creating those, especially at the beginning. Am I going to be super nitpicky on this? No, because typically lesson planning is a little bit down the road, but not everybody really goes through it. So I at least wanted to introduce, because this is Introduction to Education, I wanted to introduce this concept to you so we could, at least so it wasn't such a foreign concept and that you've heard some of this verbiage before. So that way when you hear it again and you're able to apply it, and they are going to become very nitpicky down the road, this is not a huge stressor for you. So lesson plans, and I've talked about this before. These are pretty extensive, and I get it. Are you going to have lesson plans like this due to your administration? You will have lesson plans that are due every Monday morning, probably by 8 o'clock. Will they look like this? Probably not. A lot of your school systems, they will have a template that they want you to use or a version of that. Sometimes they let you do your own thing. I was very fortunate that I was able to, I've shown you mine, that it was just basically a calendar of the week, and I just filled out those different blocks. And you will hear most teachers, that was one of the biggest complaints. Yes, they make us do it, but we don't use them that way. So then you're like, well, why do I have to do that? Because the teachers that are teaching, they know what needs to go in lesson plans. Right now, we're teaching you of what you need to look for in order to make an effective lesson plan. And so we go through those bits and pieces and make you write those out to make you aware of it. So when you transition into your real classroom and your real world, that you will know all the bits and pieces and that you will be able to effectively plan in that manner. A couple things that are going to be staples. One is going to be your topic. One's going to be, what grade are you teaching? State standards, national standards. Depends on your school system if they want national or not. But those are kind of your staples on that. So I'm just going to go block by block to kind of explain each one and just kind of move on. So your teacher candidate, that would be you. Your name goes there. Course, this is an EDUC 556. This was one of my graduate classes, so that's why I placed that there. I've already filled this in for you. You're putting EDUC 200. You will be doing lesson plans for different classes, and so what will happen is they'll say course, and then you will fill that in accordingly for whatever class that you're doing on that. Your topic, what's the topic of what you're teaching? And that means if it's if you're teaching second grade English, is it a grammar lesson? If you're teaching math, what is it? If it's science, what's the topic of whatever it is that you're teaching? What's the purpose? Okay. Now, your subject, that will be, English, science, technology, art, kindergarten, high school, English, whatever that is in each one of you guys. And I think I got everybody on that one. So that's what you would put there. Which one are you doing? Then your grade. So Mackenzie and Josh and Zach, because I know that you're doing high school and middle school, but try to pick a grade on which one that you're going to be doing on that one. Be very specific. I know Madison, I think you said second grade, and Lauren, you're fifth grade, and Liv, you are kindergarten. So that's what you would put in that particular one. The next one is your state standards. You guys have already printed these off. You already have that. Now, notice that I have Government 2E, Government 4E. A lot of times, it depends on what you're doing. Remember that 2.4, blah, blah, blah. So it could be Government second month, Government fourth month. In this particular instance, they were breaking in the subsets with using letters. Whatever they have listed is what you will put there, okay? But you've already gone into it. You've already pulled out your state standards, so you're already on the road to success. The next one is the one that we have not done yet, and that is your national standards. Your state standards are going to be very specific. And in fact, they are a great way that could even help you if you're going into your state standards, even determine what your lesson is going to be about, because they really break it down month or year and month, and they just break out the whole school year. Your national standards, you will have places where you will need to identify them. Are they as specific as your state standards? No, actually they're a lot more general. So how would you find them? I would go to my Google search engine and I would type in national standards for 2nd grade English, national standards for 5th grade science, national standards for 12th grade English, national standards for 8th grade technology, and 12th grade art or 9th grade art, national standards for kindergarten, and then it can kind of break down there. But that's how you would do that search engine. Again, they look differently. They're a little bit more vague. They're not as specific as your state standards. To me, I always found that was a little bit more difficult for some reason, because state standards just really kind of spell everything out. But again, you need to be aware of that, and you need to know that there are national standards that are available. Objectives. Okay, so this is where our Bloom's taxonomy comes in. Objectives are the foundation of a lesson plan. And we use the Bloom's taxonomy. This is the most recognized of resource that every teacher uses. It's to help create your learning objectives, and it explains the process of learning. So this is why we use Bloom's taxonomy. I'm repeating it, which means you probably need to know it. It helps create your learning objectives, and it explains the process of learning. Okay, so notice that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 6 areas of the objective, and then it goes through what each one of these objectives what it would be. Okay, now I am going to be including a video. I had actually questioned whether or not I wanted to do that, because he actually really condensed it, and I liked it, honestly. And it's where he used the acronym SMART, where they should be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And I liked that video, so I do want you to watch it, and he gives you an example of what an objective looks like. I've also given you an example of what my primary objectives would look like here. But the internet is awesome. There are so many different examples of Bloom's taxonomy. For the most part, the reason I like this one is because this is the one that you will see most of, so you really want to know that. In fact, I want you to know this, and I want you to know the stuff on the video, so make sure that you take notes on that. Now, where does this play in? Verb wheel. Basically, because your objectives are statements. This is what the student will learn in this class. And that's where that video came in, and I was like, I really like that. So are they specific? The student will learn 23 helping verbs, and be able to recite them at the end of class. So I've been very specific. Is it measurable? Can it be evaluated? Yes, they will be able to recite them at the end of class. Are they achievable? Now, the achievable piece is that it's not necessarily that it's written out, but you need to keep that in the back of your mind when you're creating your objectives. Have you taught the skills necessary for them to even go on to this lesson? And I do want to park there for just a second. We get in some really bad habits as teachers, and especially with the this SOL movement, where they get in this SOL train and they're supposed to cover X amount of material by the end of blah, blah, blah. And I've known other teachers in private school where they don't even do SOLs. They pace out the class, and hell or high water, they're going to do it, regardless of whether or not the student is ready for it or not. And I am going to strongly discourage you to do that, because our job is to teach. Our job is to prepare. Our job is to inspire. Our job is to empower. And if you are just pushing somebody along, you are missing the boat on all of those. And we want meaningful learning. just like we talked about scaffolding just a little bit earlier. We want to scaffold these skills. So have you taught the skills in order to scaffold into this next one? If you haven't, then you need to pay attention to that, because then it's not going to be meaningful, and then we've missed the point. Is it relevant? It must be relevant. And now it gives some pieces there, and I did want to talk into that. Prepare students for standardized testing. Relates to longer ideas. Builds on prior knowledge. To me, the standardized testing should be the very last thing. To me, if you're doing your job correctly and you are giving meaningful education, they will do well on the standardized test. And that's why I get so upset with the standardized testing. I get upset with the fact that schools shut down 2 weeks or a month before standardized testing to practice this test. If teachers were just allowed to do their job and teach the information, the kids would be okay. Standardized testing is there for the teachers to know where their students are. And if we're teaching to a stupid test and we're just teaching the information that's on that test, man, we missed it. And the thing is that the test should be a reflection. It shouldn't be the driver. Standardized test should be the reflection of what's been taught in the classroom. It should not be the driver. So you may want to know that because I just repeated that. Time bound. That's also something very interesting. You have a certain amount of time in which you are able to teach a subject. And what grade that you teach, how your day is designed, sometimes it will be in your control. If you're in elementary, you are in control of your day. Whereas in middle and high school, if you have specific classes, they're changing classes. They're saying you have 50 minutes, hour 45. One school I teach at 45, which is awful. Are you able to teach this lesson within that given time limit? If you're elementary, please be very careful with how you are creating your classroom in order to create your subjects. And what does that look like? And are you going to have sufficient time? I'm going to tell you right now, 20 minutes is not sufficient to teach any subject. 45 minutes, for goodness sake, is not long enough to teach any subject. So elementary, I guess it's going to be a little bit different because you've got your transition times, and again, they're littles. So make sure that when you are creating your time blocks, you have things that are going to get them up and moving, in between some of them. So it's not just this, hey, let me sit in the chair all day long. But again, you're given a certain amount of time. I've given you a time limit. You have 30 minutes. You cannot exceed 30. So it's going to be like a 20 to 30 minute presentation for your project. Because really 15, is there going to be some meaningful learning there? So I do want you to pay attention to that video. And he also gives an example of how he created an objective. And I thought that was a really good resource as well. So you need to know that, because these are the things that you need to think about as you're creating it. The Bloom's taxonomy. Create, evaluate, analyze, apply, understand, remember. Honestly, these things kind of fit into the SMART acronym. So I do want you to be aware of that. And that the verbs these are your action verbs. Will be able to, definition, outline, right, where it has here the appropriate verbs and then the student products. Conclusion, self-evaluation, what you're doing in order to do that. They will do an experiment where the student will know how to, or that will be able to discern. Let me find science real quick. They will be able to formulate a hypothesis, blah, blah, blah. So you are utilizing the words, just kind of gives you some help on that. Again, I would totally print these off and keep these in your resources. This is something that will not just be for college, you will be utilizing them all the time. Okay, so those are your objectives. Think about what it is that you're doing. What are you teaching? And what is your outcome? What's your objective? But your objectives feed into your outcomes. So what is there? You're going to be doing this in order for this to be achieved. So you are being specific. Is it achieved? And then where's your relevance, and where is it achievable? Okay. Classroom diversity and differentiated instruction. This one is going to be a little bit difficult because it shows the diversity of your classroom. I was actually teaching at this time, so that was actually my makeup of my class, where it talks about a lot of the reason that they do that is for tracking and trending. What is your class made up of? And when you're looking at that, and was it a successful lesson or not, sometimes that can play a part. So you do want to know, I had 12 students in that class. So, and I was able to, are they above average? Are they average? 2 borderline or below average? Differentiated instruction. All right, differentiated instruction is, like we were talking about before, it is meeting the kid or the student where they're at. And all of your classrooms will have different learning styles. And so I do want to actually add, some of this may be applicable or not, so it's just really going to depend upon what your lesson is. So musical. If you're elementary, music is a wonderful tool. But I have to tell you, I sing songs all the time. In fact, I sing grammar songs that I sing to my elementary students. And my high school students and my college students love them all the same. Just like I sang my sentence song, sentence is complete with 5 simple rules. It meets. It has a subject, and a verb. It makes sense with every word, at a capital letter and a punctuation mark. And now my sentence has all its parts. And so you would be surprised. There are a lot of college students that need to sing that song a lot. Helping verb song. My students, my honors students, it was just something fun that they would do. It is a supplement to help them learn, to kind of stay with them. So music is always a good thing. It could be that you're using, I think in this particular one, we were going to do sing the preamble using the Schoolhouse Rock. That's such a fun thing. I know that this is generational. I grew up with Schoolhouse Rock, but really it is such a great resource. And if you haven't, you need to Google some Schoolhouse Rock. Mathematical, logical. Mathematical, obviously, Lauren, that will be something that you will be doing. Where does this put in? Where's the logic behind it? I'm not going to be grading heavily on that one. Again, you'll be doing this. Spatial, I'm not totally really worried about 2 or 3. Verbal linguistic, what are they going to be doing verbally within your lesson plan? Those are for your verbal, your auditory learners, intra and inter. It's just like the roads. Intra means within. What is it that they will be able to work independently? And then inter, they're working in groups. And then, does that apply in what you're going to be doing? For the purposes of this, I want to see both of these filled out. Okay, because we're going to go into that a little bit more in just a second. Natural, students will discuss the living conditions during that time. I just think that's more of your connection of, that time period, or how are you going to connect this to life? What's the value? Why are you doing this? That's what that is. Okay, so I have here kinesthetic, but I also want you to add auditory and visual. In differentiation, we have 3 different learning styles. We have your visual learners, your auditory learners, and your kinesthetic learners. Your visual, if I can see it, I can do it. That means you're writing it on the board. You have pictures. You have, whatever visual aid that you have. Auditory is more of sound and how that learner, what is it that you're doing? It could be the song that you're hearing it and learning it that way. Kinesthetic is more hands-on. What are you doing to touch and feel it? It could be that you're making something, an art, you're drawing, you're creating. English, it could be that you are utilizing those skills as you're writing those out, or it could be I've seen people use Legos where they're creating sentences, like you would have words on those or parts of speech, and they would be doing that. So something that they're getting something hands-on that they will be able to touch and feel whatever it is that you're learning. Gifted students. Okay. Gifted students. All of your classrooms are going to be mixed. You're going to have the spectrum. You're going to have gifted to those that are below average. Just kind of is what it is. I want to really caution you. And I know that what I did, I think I was just probably answering the question. For honor student will be placed in each group. This is an opportunity for them to work on their leadership skill and helping students that are struggling. Please don't ever do that. Because I think a lot of teachers fall into this trap. They've got these gifted learners, and you will hear this utilized as a strategy when you go to teacher trainings. And I have to say, that's a cop-out. Because it's not teaching your student, it's not engaging them, it's not grabbing them, and there's no meaningful learning going on. And so I'm going to tell you a couple traps that people get caught into, and things I need you to be mindful of. So one is they say, okay, I'm going to have them tutor the student who really doesn't know. Well, obviously they know the material, so what are they learning? And then what is that doing for the student that is challenged? You now have to have a student come over to explain it to them. Like they don't feel like they're not getting it, and now does that make them feel more stupid than they already feel? I'm not saying that they are. I'm saying that's probably, it's just another slap in the face. And so you have a student that is feeling like they're kind of being attacked, and then that's when you get a lot of playing going on and talking because it's embarrassing. And then you have the student who knows the stuff, and they're not teachers. They don't have the patience. They're children. So are they really? You have some kids that are just natural, but for the most part, why aren't you getting this? This is easy. Okay, another slap in the face. So I really discourage that. I think that there could be some research, and I would really like for you to think about it. Also, another thing that a lot of teachers fall into, well, here's your gifted. So we're just going to give them more work. Okay, more work doesn't necessarily equate challenge. It just says, okay, I'm being penalized because I'm smart. Now I'm going to have to work more than everybody else. Now, I'm not saying that they don't have different work, or maybe they have different expectations because they're capable of doing that. But you need to let them know, I'm not just giving this as busy work. I am taking you guys, and I am, I feel like that you can be challenged a little bit more, and I feel like you would thrive on that. It could be that you do a group project with your gifted students that are in the classroom, and that they do something a little bit different, and then that could be where you're thinking outside the box. Everybody's doing a different topic anyway, so it's not going to be totally different, but your expectations, because they're gifted, are. And there's meaningful learning. It could be, that they're doing something that's more challenging to them and engaging to them. And so, like, not all these gifted kids, yes, we've got gifted schools. Well, that's not always an opportunity for everyone because they're going to a different school. They may not be able to get there. There's just a myriad of reasons. Or if they're new into a school system and they didn't go through the gifted blah, 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 and they didn't get into that school, and so they're going to be in with general population. So, you have some kids that they probably are gifted. And if they had a teacher that was just giving them extra worksheets and just extra work because they're gifted, they probably were like, you know what, screw that. I'm not going to do any more than I have to because I don't want extra work. I don't want to be an honor student. And I have to tell you, I've had students who did not want to be honor students because they didn't want the extra work. Not realizing that it was more challenging work, but they just didn't want to work more because that was established a long time ago because they were smarter or they could get it and they moved faster, that people were just giving them busy work, which means there's no engagement whatsoever and it becomes a waste of time. LD, ED, ADD, these are like learning disabilities, ADD, ADHD. If you have these learners, you will be given the ELPs, the educational learning plans. And then those plans, they will have certain things that you need to do, that you need to build in. But I do want you to think about different learning disabilities. Students work independently. The teacher will periodically visit the student, which you should be doing anyway. Movement throughout lectures and based on the classroom design, the teacher will be able to redirect any attention issues discreetly. Keyword discreetly. And actually, I did this in class one day as we were talking about ADD or kids who are getting distracted. Please do not make an example of them. It could be just, hey, I'm just going to walk by and I'm just going to tap and I'm going to keep on walking. In fact, I probably may not even make eye contact with you. If you keep on, I'm going to probably do the proximity thing till I get your attention. Or like if we're reading and I'm always looking up and everybody else's head's down and you're doing this, I'm going to catch your eyes and I'm going to redirect you that way and be quiet about it. So, what are those things that you could do in order to help those kids along? A lot of that is making yourself available, walking around the class. Where's the seating? Do you need them seated in a certain area in order to facilitate whatever? Multicultural connections. I love this, and I've told you this. I just think that there's so much value to be brought into the classroom, and especially a lot of our classrooms are multicultural anyway. How are you going to bring that into your lesson and really celebrate that? Because again, we need to be a community of people. We can't be that group and this group and that group. It's that we're able to make connections and learn who we are and appreciate the differences that we bring to the table. Next page, literature selection. Only if you're using literature. There will be some things that you will need if you're doing art and maybe you're doing an artist and a biography, like a one-page biography, that's literature. If you're reading a story that applies to whatever it is that you're doing in class, that obviously is there. So it's kind of self-explanatory there. Materials and equipment. I got tickled because I printed this off and I forgot how old this was. TV DVD player or VCR. Obviously, your classrooms typically don't really have that anymore. We usually run everything off of our laptops. And we have projectors and we have projector screens, which actually are a lot better. If you're needing speakers, that needs to go on there as well. Any materials. It could be their textbook. It could be worksheets. It could be like I have DVD. I actually own the Schoolhouse Rock DVD, so I needed to make sure that I brought that into class that day. If you're doing an art project, are you going to need paint, pencils, paper? What type of paper? Is it construction paper? Is it the big bulletin board paper or whatever it is that you're needing? Anything that you need for that lesson, that actually is for you. To make you mindful of, I need to make sure I do. So think about that. Everything that you're going to need in order to make that lesson successful needs to go there. Technology integration. Obviously, this is something that's very important for every, we've talked about this, the whole technology thing anyway. How are you going to be able to work that into what you're doing? Remember, technology can be watching a video. It could be watching a YouTube. It could be maybe if you're teaching math or science, is there a math or science game on the computer? That's technology. So anything that you would be doing, definitely you want to make sure that you have that filled out because that usually is a requirement. Character principle. Every school has principles or different character traits that they are. It could be character, integrity, respect, whatever that looks like. I was teaching in a Christian school, so in this particular lesson, I chose hope. Obviously, I'm not looking for a Bible verse because you guys aren't teaching Christian school. That was just something that I had to do for this particular lesson. But you need to know, how is it reflected? What is it that's being reflected and how is it being reflected in your lesson? Okay. Lesson presentation. It says use at least one PAR activity. PAR means peer assistant review. I'm not going into that, honestly. I do want you to know that PAR stands for peer assisted review because you're going to hear about that more later, but you're going to go more in depth with that. So I just want you to just know what that terminology is. Your lesson presentation is so important. So the first part is set. How are you going to set it up? What's your intro? What are you doing to engage? It's almost like an introductory paragraph with your hook. How are you going to set that up? How are you going to let kids know what they're getting ready to do? Then the teacher instruction. This is your step-by-step of what you're going to do in order to teach your lesson, which this takes thought. So please make sure that you're really processing through that. I've got 10 steps. How many steps does it take? Remember, you have to put yourself as the student, and what would you need in order to be taught? Remember, we're looking for meaningful instruction. How are you going to instruct or teach this lesson in order for the student to retain and gain value from what you're doing? Teacher modeling. Okay, so your lesson is broken down into 3 different things: teacher modeling, guided student practice, and independent student practice. Okay, so your modeling is, what are you doing to teach the lesson? So I'm just going to take grammar, for instance. If I was going to do grammar, I'm going to write my sentence on the board and I'm going to classify it. All the while, I'm going to be saying, what's the first thing I look for? It's my subject verb. What did they do? Or my subject noun. What did they do? My verb. I'm going to split my subject from my predicate, underline my complete subject once, my complete predicate twice. I'm going to find out what are my parts of speech: article, adjectives, prepositional phrase, adverbs, and going into my predicate, or the direct objects, prepositional phrases again, going through all of that, what type of sentence it is. And that's me modeling it. I am modeling them, and I'm giving them the expectation of what I am looking for. Sometimes you need to model something more than once, and that's okay. Then the next one is your guided student practice. That means that they have seen you do this. Now they're going to do this with you because they still need you. It's almost like riding a bike. You didn't just get on a bike and ride it. Your parents helped you. Somebody helped you and held on to that bike while you were learning. That is your guided student practice. So I'm going to put another sentence on the board. And this time we're going to work it out together. And we're going to have that interaction. I'm going to ask, okay, what's the first thing that you find when you're looking at your sentence? What's the next thing? Okay, what's the next step? And we're going to walk through that step by step. We may need to do that for 2 or 3. And then my last one is independent student practice. And this is where they are now doing it. So what I will have them do before I give them homework, because that's independent as well, I'm going to have them work a couple of them all out on their own, and I'll probably have some kids go to the board and work those out. Or I can do enough for the class, and then we go through that as well, because they've now done this, and now we're going over it that way. That way it's preparing them for when they have homework. Also, when you have kids that go to the board and do stuff, there's nothing that's more telling if a student gets it or not, is when they are showing you their work. And in class, homework is a funny little thing because anybody can be helping them with their homework. We have the wide world internet, which means guess who's helping them with their homework? That does not mean that they understand. Your classwork, honestly, will be what gauges, does this person really understand it or not? And again, creating that environment, it's a safe place. If they're not understanding, I'm okay. Well, what do we do? Let's logically walk through this and have them. Don't let them just say, I don't know, and then you give them the answer. Not meaningful learning. That's a no. You wait them out and you walk through it together. That is your guided student practice. That's teaching. Okay? So you go from your modeling to your guided practice to their independent. And by the time they get to independent, they should be understanding it. Because if you've done those first 2 steps, then they should be confident. Oh, there we go. Confident, being empowered in order to be able to do whatever that skill is. Closure. How are you going to end the lesson? You can't just leave them hanging. Now, sometimes the bell rings and it's taken away, but that's why the whole time thing, that's huge, and to kind of stay on set. But how are you going to close the lesson out? How are you going to tie it up? It could be that this is how, and I'm probably going to, usually when I'm teaching, I will give those, this is how this is going to present, this is where you're going to see this, all included when I'm doing my modeling and I'm teaching them the lesson. But how are you going to end it with them? Review the events led to the Revolutionary War. Closure could also be that you're going to give them a pop quiz or something like that. Okay, there's also summative assessment. You have to add one because there's two, especially for public school. You have to have formative and summative assessments. Okay, summative is spelled there for you. Formative, Formative. Formative assessments are what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. It's how you're teaching it, how you're practicing it, what are you doing to reinforce the skills that you are teaching. Those are formative assessments. Discussion time. It could be a game. It could be whatever that is. Examples, in-class discussions are formative assessments because they're answering you. Low-stakes group work, weekly quizzes, homework, reflective assignments, things that you're doing on a day-to-day basis. Could be a game, could be whatever, okay? Your summative assessments are like the end of the unit. That's the final. That says that all this stuff that we've been doing on a day-to-day, I have to give you a final assessment. Now, does it always have to be an exam? No. Guess what? Your summative assessment is you teaching for me because everything that we've taught everything I've taught you guys this entire semester is culminating in your final project. We've had formative assessments every single week in the form of a quiz and your papers and making you think, you've been creating your classroom management program, plans. You're doing your lesson plan. That is formative because I am scaffolding you into the final project where you are going to utilize everything that I've just done. Isn't that interesting? So your summative, I'm just going to give you some examples. Instructor created exams, standardized tests, final projects, final essays, final presentations, final reports, final grades. It is overall, after you finish the unit or whatever it is that you're going, this is the final that you're going to say, okay, I'm closing it off with this so we can move forward. You will have to, on lesson plans for the county school, you're going to have to be able to identify both of those. And the fact that they use that verbiage to their students. So students even know that verbiage. So make sure, I know that when Grace was in Bailey Bridge, they actually had it in their lesson, their homework, where you could look at the class information, formative and summative. Parents may not even know what it means, but students are learning, and you definitely need to know that verbiage. So you need to know what it is and examples of what that looks like. Okay. The lesson reflection, you will not fill that out this week. Obviously, you haven't taught it yet, but every teacher needs to do self-reflection on whatever it is they're teaching. I'd love to tell you that everything that we do is successful. Well, I've told you multiple times, there's some serious epic fails. Depending on your class, there could be some classes it works for. There's some classes it does not. Okay, so in those moments, even if it does fail, and sometimes it hurts our feelings when it fails, but it doesn't mean that there's not some good information that can come out of it. So just be mindful of that. But you're not going to fill that out. This lesson plan, you will be submitting the final, this is your product, but as you are working towards your final project of teaching that lesson for me, you're going to have to submit a lesson plan. But because you are videotaping it and teaching it, I expect the lesson reflection to be filled out for your final project. Okay, I'm going to repeat that. You will not fill out the lesson reflection for this week's assignment. You will fill out the lesson reflection for your final project. Okay, and that really kind of goes through your lesson plans and really putting yourself into putting yourself in the place of the student. How would you have to have this taught in order for you to get it and that it's meaningful? So, okay, a couple things. Make sure that you go through this. I hope you took notes. I know it's a lot of information, but this is really getting your feet wet. You're going to go into some of these areas so much more in depth, but I'd like to see what you bring to the table on that. Remember that you are adding a couple things. You're adding to your differentiated instruction. You're adding visual and auditory. I think you have a visual there. No, you have verbal. But I want auditory and I want visual added to that. And for your assessments, it has summative, but I want formative as well. I want to see that you can actually identify formative and summative. Everything that I've gone through and I've defined for you, you need to know that everything that I've gone through on here will be in some form on the quiz. How long that quiz will be, you know, I'm hoping at least 20 points. But I do want to cover the material that I have covered here for you today. If you have questions, I would love to say that everything's covered on this and everything's crystal clear, but that I think would be stretching it a bit. If you have any questions, please go to the discussion boards in that left pane and click on discussions, and it's pinned at the top. Please give me questions. And if you do, I would prefer you to utilize that because you may have a question that another classmate needs to get the answer to. Please do not wait for someone else to do it. If you have a question, go ahead and post it, okay? And so I can get that answered and so you guys can have all this information well in advance. Also, I sent you guys an announcement today about the video. In your announcements, I need you to watch that video and answer me regarding the Zoom and the lectures. Do you like for me to continue with doing the videos? Would you rather just be Zoom or, you know, whatever you want? I have to have those answers so I know what we need to do. Otherwise, I'm going to see you guys tomorrow on our Zoom class. So have a fantastic day on purpose. Get outside, get some fresh air, and I am just looking forward to seeing your final projects from last week and looking forward to these coming up. So have a fantastic day. Bye, guys.